Hey, welcome to Lessons from the Boot. I'm your host, Ms. Brittany, and every week I dive deep into the personal growth and development that living here in South Italy teaches me, in the hope that you can gain some inspiration from it wherever you may be in the world. In today's episode, I want to talk about comparison, just because I feel it is an aspect of life that has touched me the most since moving to Italy. And I think it's a very multifaceted topic. So it's quite interesting to be able to explore it and also redefine what it means. Because I do think that if you look at comparison in the right way, it can actually be more of a help than a hindrance. Comparison for me is something that touches a raw nerve when I think about it, because back in late 2019, when I had my breakdown here in South Italy, which I've spoken about a few times on my YouTube channel and also in my book, Wake Up to Your Worth, comparison was a key factor in what ultimately led me to believe that I just wasn't good enough anymore. And I remember distinctly, it was Christmas Eve of 2019. And I was walking around the streets of Palermo, and I remember that all I could see around me was what I perceived to be perfection. I could see couples walking hand in hand, groups of families together. I could hear like festive music drifting from shops, and I could see the Christmas lights twinkling everywhere. And everything around me felt like it was perfect. Everything but me. And in that moment, I felt like I was completely alone. And it was a very, very stark moment for me, and definitely was the final contributor to my breakdown. Now, though, all these years later, that I can look back on that moment, I actually can look back on it with clarity. Because when you're stuck in the trap of comparison, you are not able to really see the wood for the trees, so to speak. You're not able to identify what is fact and what is fiction. And now, looking back on that moment with clarity, I recognize that there were so many things that I didn't see in that time. Like, I didn't see the reality of the couples and their relationships. I didn't see if they were really happy or satisfied in their lives. I didn't see if those shops that were playing the Christmas tunes were really successful, or if they were wondering if they were even going to remain open into the next year. I didn't see the inadequacies that the Christmas lights tried to disguise in the city itself. There were so many things that I didn't see in that moment. And that's the problem with comparison. It can leave you with a very skewed perspective of life, which is why it's so important to recognize it for what it is. I think social media and society in general doesn't really help with comparison. You've only got to open an Instagram app or look on TikTok and immediately feel that you're not as good as another person. But I think what we fail to remember sometimes is that we are not perfect. There isn't one person or one situation on earth that is 100% perfect. And so when you want to compare yourself to another person, you are comparing yourself to somebody who is as equally imperfect as you are. And that's what you need to remember. And I feel like when it comes to being an expat, this is where you can definitely deal with comparison more, because when you are living in a completely different country, away from familiar surroundings, in a completely different culture and environment, you definitely do end up comparing aspects of your life more so than if you were living back in your own country. For example, family for me has been a big factor that I often find myself comparing against, particularly because my own family is so different to what a typical, in inverted commas, Italian family looks like. Italian families typically are very close. They see each other on a regular basis. And, you know, there's a real sense of connection. Whereas my own family are spread out all around the world. We're not as close as we could be. And my family is not as big either as some Italian families are. So there are definitely plenty of moments that come up here in Italy for me where I find myself comparing my own family to those families around me. And it can be difficult. It can really be difficult. And I think sometimes you just have to take a reality check and be like, well, you know, everybody's different. Everybody comes from a different culture and a different background. And also, not everybody does have a perfect family. Even here in Italy, there can be families with many problems and many troubles. So I think we just have to take the romanticism out of it sometimes. I kind of see it as well on my YouTube channel because people have a very romanticized view of life in Italy. And I'm very passionate about sharing the reality of life in South Italy because I think if people plan to move here or to visit here, it's good to really see what this country is like and not just to see all the beautiful aspects, of which there are many, I would like to add. But whenever I post a video where I kind of share the real, raw reality of life here in South Italy, for every person who appreciates that level of honesty, there is usually another person who is really upset that their illusion of Italy has been shattered. And this is where comparison has left us all with this skewed perspective. We see things through rose-tinted glasses. We don't necessarily see them for what they really are. And it's an interesting concept. And I wanted to dive deep into it today because it is something that has touched my life in so many ways. I remember when I first moved to South Italy, and this makes me smile whenever I think about it. I remember seeing what felt like every single Italian woman with a designer handbag. And I remember thinking, wow, like, you know, people have got money to spend here. This is before I really understood what life in South Italy is like, I feel like I should add. But this was my initial perception. It was only later on, though, that I realised just how readily available counterfeit and fake bags actually are, and how many of those bags that I thought were real designer bags were actually fake or counterfeit. So it is quite funny sometimes how we allow ourselves to form judgments and opinions. We don't know all the facts, but we kind of piece together the information. And a lot of that is gained through comparison. But I think it's important to redefine comparison because I don't think it is entirely negative. I think comparison is something that, if you don't approach it in the right way, can be extremely destructive, as I spoke about at the beginning of this episode. But I think if you are able to recognize comparison for what it is, it's usually something inside of you that is lacking or something that you wish you had. If you can see it as like an untapped desire or dream, then I think you can use comparison as more of a guide rather than something that is going to leave you feeling worthless and like you never measure up to anybody else. If you can see comparison as a guide, it helps you to understand the steps that you need to take in order to make what you're looking outside of yourself at a reality in your own life. And this is the way that I have come to reframe comparison. And it has really started to help me, particularly with my YouTube channel, believe it or not, because there are some fantastic content creators on YouTube, many of which live here in Italy. And it's very easy sometimes to look at their channels with hundreds of thousands of subscribers and, you know, all of these amazing views on their videos and make it mean that you are not good enough and that you're never going to be as good as they are. It's so easy to do this. But I have started to really hone in on what I do have and keep those moments where I want to compare myself to others as my guide to be like, okay, I know where I want to go with my channel. I know what I want to achieve. So I understand that I'm feeling this way because I have this goal. But rather than becoming obsessed with what everybody else is doing around me to the point where I distract myself from what I need to be doing, I'm going to keep that in the back of my mind and focus on creating content that I know that my viewers love to watch and build the community that I have really started to grow on my own channel rather than losing it because I'm looking at what other people are doing. And this is the thing with comparison. Like, if you can use it in this way, it can become something that can help you and guide you rather than something that takes you further away from what it is that you want to achieve. So I feel this is important. Redefining comparison is not about what other people have or the situations that they're experiencing. It's about looking in those moments when we don't feel like we're really our best selves, looking at what is attracting us and making us feel that way, or making us feel that we want something different, and then using that as the principles to help you to achieve what it is that you truly desire in your life. And I think for me, that is probably the healthiest way to look at what is and can be a very, very negative aspect in life. I'll see you in the next episode.